BioWare are on thin ice, and Dragon Age the Veilguard may very well be their last chance. If this is a flop, if it doesn't do as well as EA are expecting, and I do think that EA are going to have pretty high expectations for this, it could be the end for BioWare. There won't be a Mass Effect 5, there won't be any more Dragon Age games. That could really be it. And it's a question people are now kind of asking. It's around sort of 6-7 weeks away. We've seen a bit more of the game after it was hidden for so long. And the question really is this game going to flop, or is it going to be an unexpected success? I'll say for myself, if I sort of ask that question, do I want this game to fail? Do I want it to flop? What I'll say is I might give a 0.5, maybe 1% chance, if I'm being generous, of the game actually surprising us all. Maybe it really is the case that the obsession that BioWare seem to have with pushing DEI, with pushing propaganda onto us with this game, maybe it's not actually there and it's just a few insane individuals from the marketing department. Maybe underneath all of that, there is a fantastic game that's true to the series, it's true to the role-playing game genre, action, combat aside, and there is a hidden gem in there. There's maybe, again, 0.5% chance or something of that happening. So not ruling it out, that'd just be far too negative for sure. We wouldn't want that. Looking at the other side of this, though, wanting the game to fail. Why would someone want this game to fail? And I think that answer is quite obvious. It's not about seeing a role-playing game fail, or even just being sort of salty about Anthem and some of BioWare's past failings and wanting it to fail for that reason. It's not really any of that. It's just this game is yet another classic example of where the development team does not really care about role-playing games as a first priority. They don't care about the entertainment value for gamers, for players. They're just obsessed with pushing their political leanings onto us. And I mean, when they conceived this game, it wasn't about, oh, the Dragon Age IP, doing best by it, making RPG fans happy with a great experience. It was very much about, from the start, how can we push LGBTQ rights forward? How can we push trans rights forward? How can we ensure that people who play, who maybe don't even think about politics too much, it's not really on their mind, how can we sort of manipulate them into thinking like us? Turn them into one of us. That is the mindset from the development team. Gamers are really sick of that. They've shown that this year. It's probably the thing that makes me most optimistic about gaming in the future, that gamers are actually voting with their wallets now. For a time, it kind of felt like that you'd get these games, they'd be DEI infested, they'd have microtransactions, season passes, whatever, but they would still sell really well, and it basically told the publishers nothing. They could just keep getting away with that, and we just consume. That isn't going to work anymore. If a game is garbage, if it pushes crap we don't want, if it has ugly characters, nothing about it is appealing at all, even normies aren't buying these anymore. They're sick of it. They'll try and tell you, oh, it's just culture war nonsense. No, it's common sense. Common sense people out there who don't think about politics, they don't want this stuff anymore. They don't even see it as political. It's just called having some sanity. And coming back to that question of, do I want this game to fail? If it's as bad as it's looking and as what's been shown, if every assumption we have about it, the development team, is correct, then absolutely I want this game to fail. We've had a lot of these games flopping. It's a great thing. The industry is going to improve. We even saw, I think it was the CEO of the Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, I think it is. The CEO came out, and that game is being very well received because it's basically like a game from 15, 20 years ago in tone, where it's just cool. You're just killing things. There's no agenda. There's no rubbish. People are liking it. It's already selling really well from what I'm seeing. It has like 60k Steam reviews. Most of them are very, very positive. The CEO came out and said himself, he's sick of the propaganda in the games industry. He's sick of all of this nonsense, agenda pushing. He just wants to make fun games for gamers that entertain people, and probably just wants to have fun making them as well. Not hearing about employees who want to be called professor, preferred pronouns around the office, all of this sort of crap. Just games by gamers. He wants to get back to that. He's seeing the rewards for having that culture, I assume, within his studio, where they're just making the best game possible for gamers. He's getting rewarded. I don't want to see BioWare get rewarded. If they're pushing this garbage, they deserve to fail, they deserve to get shut down. And sure, it'd be nice to see Dragon Age Mass Effect get redeemed one day. It's not going to happen under this current iteration of BioWare. It's rotten. The studio culture is clearly rotten from everything they're making, everything they've said, everything we've seen about the game. I don't think it's going to happen. So I think there's more benefits at this stage for it to fail. Again, that 1% chance that it doesn't pan out that way and it's actually good. We can keep that little bit of hopium somewhere, but I don't think that's going to happen. In terms of whether it will actually fail, the evidence around that, we'll look at some figures in a second, but just in terms of the general vibe, I was kind of surprised because the Dragon Age subreddit, I assumed it was like the most positive place on the internet for the Veilguard discussion, that if you said anything negative, you would get banned, that's it. No, we're only about toxic positivity here, nothing else. But I'm not even really seeing that at the moment. For instance, the top post is about Dragon Age Inquisition. You have, of course, the artwork sexualizing the companions, because it's okay if it's Dragon Age, if it's a supposed DEI-friendly game. If it's Stellar Blade, literally anything else, then you're the worst person in the world. So we can see here, Davrin, one of the companions, beautiful eyes! My huge tits are down there, his man tits apparently, great. Here's another one, I love Grandpa, or something. So basically just artwork, which is typical for Reddit, but you would think with the game being so close and there not being that many places to discuss the game positively, you'd think that there would be more discussion with substance. There's certainly not much, but I did find this. So this is pretty recent. How are we all feeling about Veilguard? I'm cautiously optimistic. I was sort of, oh, is he going to get banned? Is cautiously optimistic being positive enough, or is there a hint of negativity? Is that no good? Well, just about every comment is like this. There's very few people who are genuinely pumped up. They're ready to buy it. They're excited. And this is meant to be the community that is most positive. If these people aren't getting hyped, who is? Maybe some of these shills on Twitter who are a part of the Dragon Age Club or whatever it's called, where they're basically paid to promote the game. I think that's the arrangement. But here on Reddit, these are the people who would usually be like, you can't say anything negative, you've got to be 100% all in. There's none of those people like there is for literally any other game, even games that are quite contentious. There's usually a group who are all in on it, and I'm not seeing that here. There's people saying, it's not what I would have liked it to be, but I'm ready to judge it on its own merits. Like, that's one of the most positive comments. That doesn't sound like anyone's hyping it up. So far, there's almost an equal amount of things that make me optimistic as there are changes that make me worried. Now, he might genuinely feel that way, but I just have a feeling if you actually grilled him and said, what are the things that you're optimistic about? It'd be a very short list, and there'd be a long list of the things that make him worried. But a lot of these people don't want to admit that they're really just not excited for it, and it's copium because of the Dragon Age name. They're really hoping something will come out of it, but we're not seeing it. Again, people get excited for hairworks, they get excited for accessibility features, nothing about the actual content in the game. I found another one, by the way. This is the latest thing they're all getting excited about. So, forget about the fact that the companions themselves suck, the combat's not looking too good, the vibe of the game, it's just not really there, but forget all of that, because like with the hair and other things, there are 9 reasons that the Veilguard's pansexual cast benefits the narrative. The story's saved, we're back, and I thought I might go through these, but it was just so painfully boring, I couldn't do it. Like, the interactive factor, what does that mean? No barriers to love! Romance is a reason. So, yeah, if this is one of the reasons that you're hyping yourself up, I think we're going into full denial territory. It's not working out for them. If you want DEI Simulator, and that's what you've come for, maybe you'll get something out of this. But RPG fans, it's looking like disappointment. And even ignoring some of those antidotes when we actually look at numbers, they're looking really bad for the game as well. I think I looked at the Steam charts for the Veilguard a little while ago. They weren't good. It was at like 140 or maybe 160 or something. Now it's on page 3 of Steam bestsellers. So page 3, you're getting past number 200. Dragon Age the Veilguard is the 206th best-selling game right now. That is extremely bad. Like, the game's coming out pretty soon. And some people might have an optimistic opinion and say, oh, well, maybe gamers are learning. They're not just blindly pre-ordering anymore. I don't think that's true because there's plenty of games coming out soon that are at much higher numbers on this list. 206 is really, really bad. Like, this is really why I think this game is going to flop. You always have to ask yourself, am I in an echo chamber with this? Maybe gamers are interested. Seeing how far down it is, no one's really buying this. And this is a big budget game. It's not some indie endeavor or anything. Like, it's had a huge budget. BioWare are huge. They've had like 5 years development. EA are going to have high expectations, given even Anthem, a failure, failed on pretty much every metric. It still sold something like 5 million copies. This doesn't look like it's going to do those numbers. And even Wishlist, number 42, so not super high or anything. What it really proves, and I've said this before, is the game is simply not going to sell based on name recognition, the studio, any sort of prior trust. People do not trust BioWare, they do not trust EA, so they're waiting and seeing, is the game going to be good? If it is fantastic, if it surprises everyone, I look totally stupid for doubting BioWare. If that happens, then it will sell. People won't be stuck in their ways. They'll buy this if it's a good RPG, but it's going to come down to word of mouth. It's not going to be about any hype because there isn't any. People just aren't excited, it seems. It's going to have to genuinely be a fantastic game for BioWare to turn that around. I don't think that's going to happen because when you really think about it, in the last few years, how many games have looked bad when you've seen trailers, when footage has been shown? And then when you actually play it, it turns out it's actually fantastic. We were all wrong. We made an assumption, we judged a book by its cover, but it turned out the game was actually great. That almost never happens. It's almost always the reverse, where it actually looks good when they show it to you. They pull smoke and mirrors to make the game look maybe better than it is, and you play it and it's a genuine turd. That's happened more times than we can count, but the opposite, barely. Like, if it's a bad first impression, they never really recover from that. They never show anything that's better. The game's almost always just universally bad across the board. Everyone can see it. So I don't think that's going to help BioWare. They haven't been able to improve the game's reputation so far. It's another reason that it just looks like it's going to flop. And just sort of thinking as well about how many copies this game would actually have to sell to be considered a success, I was actually kind of surprised at how few copies the series has sold overall. Like, we can see here, it's probably an estimate, but it says here the Dragon Age sales reached over 11.2 million units. That's across all the games, Origins 2 and Inquisition. So the entire series has sold less copies than Baldur's Gate 3, for instance. So, I mean, if you think of Hogwarts Legacy, which I know there's a big IP and it's more accessible, that game sold like 25, 30 million copies, and Warner Brothers was still talking about totally changing directions for a sequel and going all in on live service. Like, these days, for these big companies, 20 plus million copies is still not something they're happy with sometimes. And maybe EA have lower expectations, realistic expectations, but I just find that kind of funny. Like, the whole Dragon Age series, 11.2 million units. What I think it does say is the Veilguard would need to comfortably be the best-selling game to justify the development costs, which are way more expensive than when any of the older games in the series were made. So Inquisition sold 6 million units. I think they're expecting the Veilguard to double that number, and I'm not seeing it. I'm certainly not seeing that if every existing fan buys this, it's going to hit its target. I don't think so, because being realistic, there's plenty of people who liked Origins, didn't like some of the follow-ups. Those people will have kind of fallen off the series, and at best, they'll be in wait-and-see mode. They're not just going to run out and buy the new one when they didn't even finish Inquisition. So I think at best, if we're being realistic, there might be sort of a couple of million sales that are kind of just guaranteed based on the name. People who don't care about the poor showing and the poor reception so far, some people will definitely buy it. We're not going to do Concord numbers, 25,000 copies. But even if you have a couple of million sales guaranteed, that's not going to be nearly enough. You've got to convince probably another 8 million people to buy this game, or it could be the end of BioWare. I don't think that's going to happen. The game already has an abysmal reception, and I bet there are a lot of people who previously, like a year or two ago, they would have told themselves, if a new Dragon Age comes out, I'm definitely all in day one. And then they saw it for themselves, they saw the vibe, and they went, no thanks, I'm going to wait for a sale, a deep sale. later down the line. So they've already probably lost a lot of these sales that they need. And the game's not even out yet. We're not even getting real feedback. Just to end on this too, I found this reaction kind of funny. So Asmongold did a reaction to the IGN gameplay preview, and his summary essentially was that the game looks worse than Concord. Now, this guy isn't someone who is like all in on Dragon Age and he's disappointed by the new direction. I don't think he has ever played a Dragon Age game, but he looked at this, had no real previous bias, and he thought it just looked like total shit. And there'll be people who'll say, who cares what a streamer thinks? He's not part of the target audience, blah, blah, blah. But he represents, I think, the sort of person who needs to be interested in the Veilguard if it's going to succeed. Those gamers who, they're not obsessed with every single new RPG, but they want to play whatever new game looks cool. Like if it's Black Myth Wukong, someone like this gets excited. Space Marine 2, they don't want to miss out on that release hype, they want to be part of it. Asmongold thinks it looks worse than Concord. So do a lot of people. It looks absolutely abysmal. It's totally failed that first impression check, that vibe check, and that's going to be really bad for BioWare, I think. It needs those casual fans, and it's lost them. BioWare chose to prioritize propaganda over fun. I think it's going to cost them. I think the game is going to be an absolute abysmal failure, and it's seeming like from everything we've seen from the development team that they probably deserve it. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.